Hello, everyone, and welcome to GoT Thrones, what is normally a Game of Thrones podcast, but this week is a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
It is quite the week for us.
Yes. I am Alexandra August.
I'm Johnny Kolasinski.
And welcome to the still as yet unnamed Star Trek Discovery podcast, brought to you by GoT Thrones at this point. This week we're going to be talking about today we're going to be talking about Battle at the
Bastards.
Battle at the Binary Stars. As opposed to, we've already talked this week, so it's like Thursday we're talking about Battle at the Binary Stars, because we spoke about the Vulcan Hello on Tuesday morning. So if you're coming to this and you haven't seen the first half of the Star Trek Discovery pilot, or if you thought that this episode was going to cover that, go and listen to the Vulcan Hello first. We're going to be talking about the second half, Battle at the Binary Stars, today, right now.
Yeah.
Separate episodes.
Spoilers all. Spoilers DS9, spoilers Voyager, probably some spoilers Game of Thrones, because we slipped those in earlier this week.
Also a couple of Star Trek books and novels that we've read in common, and fan fiction possibly, also Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Yeah. Also probably spoilers Reddit.
Yeah, that too. And so with that, I think we can get into it.
Yeah. So for those of you who were like me and only watched it on CBS All Access, interesting thing to note is that Battle at the Binary Stars was not aired on CBS broadcast. So we had the 2-part pilot, but only part 1 was seen by everyone. So it'll be interesting to see how the ratings for part 2 turn out.
Exactly, because part 2 is pretty important, I would imagine, to understand for part 3, as we'll get into in our recap. Johnny and I just actually hit the stumbling block because we were checking our notes with Memory Alpha, one of the Star Trek wikis, one of the more dependable Star Trek wikis out there, and Memory Alpha has put all of their episode descriptions behind a spoiler wall. Essentially, you have to actually create an account with fandom/Memory Alpha in order to access episode descriptions and the database for any episodes, I guess, that have aired on CBS All Access, because I'm assuming they're just trying to delay spoilers for people who don't want to search for them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
It meant we have to rely on our own brains a little bit more.
Yeah. So we apologize in advance for any inaccuracies. We try really hard not to have them happen, but occasionally they do. Yeah,
I apologize for the fact that I might, refer to Michael Burnham as Mikey. Apparently that's not canon.
Well, it's not canon yet.
Spoilers episode 4. Mikey likes it.
So, speaking of Mike, we open the Battle at Binary Stars with kind of a 10-second or 30-second flashback to the Vulcan Hello. Michael Burnham runs onto the bridge, tells Saru that everything's fine and they should just fire on the Klingon vessel that's out in the front yard. They lock weapons, and Philippa Georgiou comes out of the reading room, revived from her Vulcan nerve pinch that her first officer gave her, points a phaser at her XO, and says, "Belay that order. We aren't firing on anything."
Yep. That's where we left them, and we come back to an extended moment of tension on the bridge.
Until
until a bunch more Klingons had already showed up at that point.
Until a bunch more Klingons, until the tension raises, until the stakes raise even higher. And luckily for Michael Burnham, she's spared the rod a moment, because Philippa has to deal with the fact that she's now one Starfleet old vessel against officially 24 or 25 Klingon warships.
So they're kind of boned.
A little boned. And so it's the perfect time for a flashback. We flash back to Michael Burnham and Sarek, James Frayne, beaming aboard the Shenzhou. It's 7 years ago, and Sarek this was a little foggy for me, I guess, putting her in an internship. I guess he's got a relationship with Philippa, but she gets a commission.
She gets a commission of some sort, and is in her Vulcan cardboard dress.
It looks a lot like the art smock that my friends 1-year-old wore when they went to visit the like Austin Kids Science Center. She put a picture on Facebook and said, "It's my little space princess," and it's this little boy in a very similar dress but blue to what Michael wears.
To me, it looked like the inverse of Marjorie's burrito dress from season 2.
That would be season 2 of Game of Thrones, and you're absolutely right. Essentially, yeah, so Sarah introduces Philippa to Michael. Michael is kind of the Worf version of a Vulcan who's trying too hard. I mean, she's very Worf-like in her Vulcanness. She is extra Vulcan. Yeah. Because she's had to try for it. And
more than Worf, she reminded me of the kid in season 5 or season 6 of Next Generation that was trying really hard to be Data.
Oh, yeah. The kid who loses his parents.
The kid who lost all of his parents.
Yeah. Because he thinks he gets flipped back and his hands like hit a panel and he thinks that he did it. And then that's when you learn that like, I remember that because I always wondered watching Star Trek The Next Generation. I was like, what if somebody just like bumps into a computer? It looks like that's really important because, you know, the way they like just touch the computers with their fingertips.
The way Riker sits on them.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully in the 6th season, somebody was like...
Riker's ever like butt-dialed Loxana?
Probably. 100% that has happened. But yeah, I mean, now that you mention that, of course, it's probably happening right now. This time is a flat circle. So yeah, that was the episode that they tell the kid reveals at the end of his sort of like 45-minute grief cycle that he thinks it's his fault that his parents died because a blast knocked him back into the panel and he hit something, and then of course his things exploded because his parents were in battle or something happened.
And it's Starfleet.
Yeah, and so
they keep all of their explosives in consoles.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but then somebody's like, "Oh, girl, don't eat. No. The computers
Data
have a
was
lockout
like, "Oh,
system."
girl.
Yeah, they were like, no. There's a lockout system. Like your fingerprint is the only thing that works on that, which makes perfect sense. But it was so nice that they grounded. So we do some tangents on this podcast. If this is your first time listening, that was one of them.
That was one of them. It was
pretty concise.
Luckily, all of our tangents are about Star Trek, so suddenly we're set.
I know, suddenly we're always relevant. So we have this flashback where Michael gets on the Shenzhou, and Philippa essentially tries to be human with her and make a couple of jokes, and Michael is like, "I am a Vulcan and I don't do jokes, thank you very much." And Philippa's like, "Yeah, you're a human and you need to be way less of a dork."
Yeah.
It's just...
I do want to say that Sonequa Martin Green did an excellent job at playing her young.
I agree.
But still... that she was youthful despite the stoicness, which I found really impressive.
Yeah, because honestly, it was in this scene that I kind of realized we were watching her sort of verbally spar with Georgiou and Transporter. Georgiou makes a joke, and Burnham is like, "Excuse me." That joke was like, she very much kind of... You always know when Spock's being a little superior. Mm-hmm. And this was one of those moments. This was one of those Vulcan moments where she was like, "Yeah, your humor has no place here, human." And Philippa kind of expertly weaves around that, and she winks. She kind of winkily says, "Oh yeah, it's good that you're back with your own kind. Like, you've been with Vulcans too long, and that's why Sarek brought you here." Then she said that he brought you to me because I was... sorry, that's later, but It was a moment that really grounded the relationship between Georgiou and Burnham for me. Mm-hmm. And it also revealed, and this was kind of thrilling. This is like on my third watch, and I hope everybody who's listening to this, watch this episode a couple of times. I know you probably have lives and things to do and time to spend on other things, but if you're a dork like me and you have the time, give this episode a couple of watches, because once you get past the lens flares and the obscene amounts,
the interesting camera work,
and all of the exposition, there is some really daring stuff here, especially in the fact that we look I looked at Burnham in the scene and I was like, oh, you had a traumatic grief incident, essentially. You dealt with this huge loss, and immediately after which you were adopted into a society that suppresses all emotion. But here's the here's the thing. She's a human, and humans don't operate that way. And watching her sort of ape volcanism on the transporter pad made me realize this is the most emotionally broken main character that we've ever seen on Star Trek. Aside from Sisko, but Sisko had a lot of Sisko's stuff was pretty raw.
Sisko had a spine backing him up.
Yeah, and it was, he kind of got over it in like 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that also Sisko had access to Federation therapy.
Oh, yeah. This is someone who, and also like everyone knew Sisko had to deal with this kind of grief, and Georgiou knows Michael's history, but she doesn't know, I think, the depth of, or maybe she does and she just fails. I don't know, but I think Sisko knew that he was broken. I think is the more relevant thing to say. Whereas Michael thinks she's fine. She's too young to realize that you can't process grief that way, and that it's gonna come back and bite you.
It's gonna come back with you sabotaging your career by knocking out your boss.
Yeah, and what she says later to Georgiou I guess it's more of I can't tell if it's her ready room or a conference room, because if it's her ready room, it's really big. It's very large.
I think that the Enterprise ready room was equally large. We just only saw it from one angle.
The Picard?
Yeah.
I would encourage you to go back and watch that, because it seemed like it was very long. It wasn't very wide, but it was long. But we'll discuss that. Yeah, or it could have just been the camera work and the lens flares, and I was like, oh, is this a telescopic lens? I don't know.
No, it did seem very long, but we had to fit 3 people in there.
This is true.
It'll be interesting to see how much more of the Shenzhou we get to see over the course of the season.
I wonder about that, because Philippa did drop that line once we pop back from the flashback, and I believe, well, actually, we'll get to that, I guess, in a second. We pop back from the flashback, and then it's actually over to T'Kuvma's ship, as all of the Klingons, since all the Klingons have shown up that the Starfleet is reacting to, they are now communicating with T'Kuvma, being like, excuse me, you lit the beacon of Kahless. We're here.
What's going on?
Yeah. And this is when T'Kuvma essentially unveils his plan to the leaders of the Klingon houses, and some of them are like, you don't even have a ship. You don't deserve a seat on this council. You have a crew full of mongrels. Why should we listen to you?
Yeah. I think that we saw, at least the implication, Voke's original house.
I believe it was T'Kuvma's original house. His father was killed, and
that one of the Klingons on the hologram was one of T'Kuvma's house members that exiled him.
T'Kuvma or Voke?
I'm sorry, Voke.
Oh, okay.
One of Voke's house members that exiled him.
Oh, okay. Then I take your I believe you on that. I didn't catch
it was
that,
implication. It wasn't directly said.
I think the show was painted things with a pretty big red brush. So if they implied something, I would imagine we're going to see more of it. But T'Kuvma, we get at this point when T'Kuvma is sort of pontificating to the 24 house heads, he goes into his own backstory, because one of them, I forget the name of the guy's house, but he refuses to go along with T'Kuvma and T'Kuvma's call for racial purity and to start a war with the Federation, because they're encroaching upon them, and they want everyone to be in this like happy little organization, but they don't respect. But under his opinion, they don't respect Klingon culture. So he wants the 24 houses to unite and go to war with them, and claims that he's the second coming of something. We'll get to that.
Of Kahless.
Yeah. He doesn't say Kahless, but
he ends up calling him. Well, he ends up being named T'Kuvma the Unforgettable.
Exactly.
Which
available at Macy's.
Kahless. Yeah.
And so he's telling the heads of the 24 houses, like, this is what they should do, and a couple of them are like, we will hear no more of this. because you don't have a ship and you don't deserve a seat on this council. And then we get a flashback that is Takuvma, as Takuvma narrates that I guess his father lost his ship, and then literally it looks like he's just playing on Kronos and he finds it. And then he defends it from a lot of little boys.
Or using it as a playground.
Yeah, and Voke is one of those little... Voke is...
I don't think that it was lost as in misplaced. I think it was lost as in he was no longer worthy of it, or he died in it. Went to pot.
Yeah, it just seemed... That's probably what it is, but I feel like in that kind of thing, if you have this much exposition, and you have this much... If you're going to spend the money on a flashback, make it a little more nailed down how he, like... Does he live near there? Like, where was the ship parked? It looked like it was crash landed on a planet. I don't know. It was...
Yeah.
Anyway, so... Voke kind of steps up in his... When people are still kind of like, no.
Voke is an excellent hype man.
Yeah, he is a very excellent hype man.
Voke is the Little John of
this really
24th century Klingon.
Robin Hood. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wasn't saying Robin Hood. I was thinking more hip hop.
Oh, maybe the two are connected.
What, Lil Jon and Little John?
Perhaps.
This is an entirely new tangent for us, folks.
Undiscovered country. This also in this sort of pontification show of power, puff, 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 that we learn that Takuvma has developed a cloak. And this is according to the Klingons' news, so it's looking like this Star Trek canon is placing responsibility for the development of Klingon cloaking technology on Takuvma. And it's a little bit hairy with how the Romulans got cloaking technology. People have speculated that the Romulans and the Klingons might have discovered that, like, Romulans discovered it, fed it to the Klingons, let them use it in order to mess with the Federation, or the Klingons discovered it and gave it to the Romulans. We don't know, but that's a big resonant statement to make, because this pilot has really respected canon for the most part. They've really tried
for the most part, with the exception of design, which we discussed last week.
Yeah, and they've made some audacious developments, like just the position of Michael as Sarek's daughter, but they've made enough nods to canon, like Donatu 5 and like Takuvma and the Kuvma got, like, just with Voyager, that I have faith in them in this one. It's just it's really interesting. The cloak thinking is really interesting to me.
Something about the cloak.
Yeah. But you see, that's why it interested me. I was like, if you're going to make that kind of audacious statement, then I'm curious to see if it's backed up.
The cloak was green.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Did you see this on Reddit too?
Yes, I did, but I was going to take credit for it. But yes, I absolutely saw it on Reddit. Or I was going to just let it go uncredited because I'm a dick. Also, now one of the moderators of r/Star Trek is reading this, so I should probably credit these things. So thank you, Alex. But the cloak was green, and this is something that I absolutely would not have caught. That TNG and the TNG era Klingon cloaks were not green, however Romulan were.
Well, and I think we wouldn't... I don't know that your eye would have been trained to notice that, if only because I just assumed whatever the cloak kind of took on the appearance of the metal that was underneath it. Mm-hmm. And so I just dismissed it. It wasn't so much what the cloak looked like was... That's just a detail that I missed when watching those shows, because it just, I think initially I just noticed it. I probably made note of the color initially, like way back when I first saw a ship to cloak. But then when I noticed, I was like, oh, it's green for Romulans and red for Klingons. It must reflect the color of their ships, that I stopped noticing the color. And
yeah,
I wonder if that wasn't the reason they did that to begin with. And then it just made a handy plot device for this episode, but it's still bearing.
But also in After Trek, which is the CBS All Access Let's Talk About the Show we just watched show, they had Akiva Goldsmith, who's one of the writers and producers on the show. I'm sorry? Goldsman, I'm sorry. Who is one of the writers and producers on the show. And he specifically said that Romulan at this point in time is a dirty word in the writer's room, and we are not. They're not going to be showing up for at least this first season.
But the fact that he had that reaction to it makes me think that no, they're not going to be showing up this season. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had a hand in this later on. If
they're built into the arc already, their place in the arc is already built.
That really just also given the attitude of the show to really take some of the dismissive concepts or the dismissed concepts in Star Trek, something like Donatu 5, and then blow something like this out of it to use those threads and to create something new. There's very little known about the Romulans in this time period, and we also have that fantastic we also have the Enterprise incident in the original series that is this phenomenally fascinating episode and interplay between Spock and this Romulan commander, and it's such a fantastic introduction to the species but also it's like basically a capsule episode and we hear very little from the Romulans. Are they even mentioned for the rest of the original series?
Yes, I am sure they are.
But it's not much. The Klingons are very much the villain of that series, and then they come back and they're much more heavily focused on the Next Generation. But it would make sense for this show, just given what I've seen in the first 2 episodes, to take that thread and weave it into something really, really meaty. 15 years before. It'd be like now I'm like all excited about seeing the Romulan commander and finally learning her damn name. I don't know it. But they this is a scene where they mention Donatu 5, and T'Kuvma tells the 24 heads of house that since their last confrontation, the Federation has only encroached and the Klingons have just infought more.
Yeah.
And this is when Philippa Georgiou actually hails the ship. And she tries to reason with them and tries to say, hey, guys, you're in our territory. And then she says...
and the response is, new phone, who dis?
Basically, yeah. And then she says, but don't worry, it's fine. And he goes, we come in peace. And before she says we come in peace, T'Kuvma says, listen...
here comes the lie.
Yeah, and it was so annoying. I don't know if, listeners, you liked the delivery that Johnny and I just did, recapping that thing. But that's basically what it was like to watch, which was...
I didn't have that problem with it.
Oh, man. He stepped on our line. That was, like, I watched the first 2 episodes. I don't know if they were just assuming that people wouldn't watch them in order, I guess, because CBS made that really fucking difficult, but it's, like, that was the first monologue in the pilot ended with "we come in peace." He made a big deal out of it. I had to read a lot of subtitles. I know. And then we have this huge moment, which probably should have ended the first episode instead of being shoved like 10 minutes into the second. This huge moment where Georgiou, at this point we know her and we know she means that she comes in peace. That she didn't want any of this. And then as she's about to say it and we see it happening and we see these 2 storylines merge in the most upsetting and dramatic and problematic way, he steps on it and he says, here's their lie, and the impact is totally lost, or at least it was on me. Like I was like, oh, why did you interrupt her? Why would you interrupt Michelle Yeoh?
See, I don't think that there is any impact to a human saying we come in peace, because it is a trope. And so that didn't upset me in the slightest, because to me there wouldn't have been any weight to her message otherwise.
Even though that was like the first monologue in the pilot. This is how they open the pilot. They didn't open with humans, they open with Klingons talking about how humans lie and say they come in peace, and then they actually have a human say it.
No, didn't bug me.
Okay.
Agree to disagree.
This was
a great last episode of our podcast, guys.
Well, it was just another example of how I like so much about this pilot. I like so much about this plot. I like so much about this story, which is the same thing. But it felt like the overall problem for me was that nothing was earned and everything was underlined.
Okay, if you feel like that right now, you need to go back. We need to stop this podcast, and you need to go watch Encounter at Farpoint and realize what you have right now.
No, that was people in stupid jumpsuits with, like, spindly aliens, and there was an immortal god. That was absurd. This is supposed to be a little bit more, a little bit more realistic, as realistic as we can obviously get in the Trek universe. But this isn't magic. Q's magic. There's an there's an element of surrealism to Encounter at Farpoint, which sells it. I mean, the Q stuff works, and it makes up for the alien stuff.
It makes up for the plot that they came up with for the episode.
I don't hate Encounter at Farpoint. It's all like the later documentaries that hate Encounter at Farpoint. I didn't think it was that terrible an episode. I thought it was pretty good, and I think Deanna's costume is phenomenal. It's certainly better than the Bun of Steel, which was the original Bun of Steel.
I cannot make it through Farpoint.
Oh, come on. When Wesley, figures out the holodeck. The hardest thing about Farpoint for me is the lack of Riker beard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mostly my problem with the first season, but with the rest of the first season, my hatred for the Riker beard was, mitigated.
Martin Green looks like with a beard.
Well, we don't know that she's going to be the XO on Discovery.
In fact, we can pretty much guarantee she won't.
I hope she's not. Otherwise, don't have a lot of faith in Starfleet's penal system. But no, the reason I was able to tolerate the Riker beard for the rest of season 1 is that my hatred of it was mitigated by my hatred for Deanna's cardboard costume and just really intense bun.
Yeah.
And then the battle starts at that point, kind of as T'Kuvma is saying that Starfleet's going to encroach on their territory. Starfleet shows up. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about this. So I can't decide if I think everything falling into place the way T'Kuvma sort of wanted it to fall into place is contrived or it's actually really genius.
I think that T'Kuvma was smart. I think that T'Kuvma was not just a fanatic, and that it might not have T'Kuvma wasn't Littlefinger, but I think that had it not fallen into place exactly how he wanted it to, he would have been able to spin things, not necessarily spin because he's a Klingon, but work things in a way that they still fell into place exactly where he wanted them to.
Okay, for example, the timing was just really good. So here's, I was thinking about this beforehand, and I was like, all right, so here's his thought process. Let me try and work it through. It's like, okay, so I have this sect of people. I have this group of people that clearly, believe in me. So I'm gonna lure Starfleet, or I think a lucky thing was that it worked out that the beacon of Kahless happened to be near a Starfleet relay and in Starfleet space, on the border.
Or he moved it. Okay, well. So that happens, and so he drags Starfleet there, and then the Torchbearer goes out, but he couldn't have predicted that that Burnham would encounter the Torchbearer, so that was lucky. And the Torchbearer didn't necessarily go out to light the beacon.
Well, no, I know.
The Torchbearer might have gone out because of Mike.
Well, no, but they didn't know that she was coming. How could they? Well, or is it because they were cloaked? They could sense what they were doing, but
they saw that they saw the Shenzhou there. I'm sure that they could tell that there was a person jumping off the boat.
Well, no, because they mentioned at some point during the episode that their sensors would make it. They know that they're basically in the binary star system. There's a lot of debris, so the sensors can't detect anything. I think that's why they sent her in the first place, because the shuttle can't make it through.
I think that the cloaking device was also interfering and they just didn't know it.
Yeah, I think that's why they couldn't see that was a sensor dead zone. But I don't think the ship can. I don't think T'Kuvma's ship can detect her.
I don't think that Klingon was surprised by much.
I think he was, though, because at some point they say in they say in the episode that, like, when they send the torpedo, they won't be able to distinguish it from debris or from the other asteroids. So there's no way the Klingon sensors, even just because they were in the field. I know it's in an asteroid field, but like all the stuff in the debris, there's no way they could detect her that small. So they didn't know she was coming. That was a surprise.
But she would have been putting out all sorts of subspace noise.
I don't disagree with you, but like, so would a shuttle, and that's exactly what they were like. Well, the shuttle's too big. We have to send the torpedo, and that's why we're sending the torpedo suicide bomb there, because they won't detect
that they couldn't send the torpedo. They couldn't send the shuttle because the cloak.
Well, no, there's also a radiation field too.
They were being jammed.
But there's also a radiation field, and she goes in there, and so her messages are obscured.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think the radiation field is actually the cloaking device, but that doesn't mean that you're not correct.
I think it was the stars, because they're anyway. Yeah, you're right. That's not worth. But yeah, so he doesn't know that she's going to be there. She's there. It's lucky, and they lock their weapons after, and they call them out. I don't know. It just. The timing of everything, like, how could he have guessed that many Starfleet ships would be there? Because they already had to start coming after he called the other ships. So it's not like he could get the 24 Klingon ships there and then assume that would attract the Star. He was betting on the fact that his presence there would disrupt things enough for Starfleet to send a full force.
He might have also caught the message to Starfleet before he lit the beacon, but he was still planning on lighting the beacon, so...
Yeah, maybe this is something that we'll have to see out through the next couple of episodes, but yeah. I couldn't tell. Like, I mean, as much as I love Battle of the Bastards on Game of Thrones, it is, as I've had to kind of eat crow over this, like, it is kind of annoying that Sansa does not tell Jon that the Knights of the Vale are coming when she probably had knowledge of it and she knew it was a possibility. It makes sense that it would be something that Sansa was due, and she doesn't do it. And because she doesn't do it, we have this great TV moment. It doesn't make total sense to me that the timing would have lined up so perfectly for Takuvma that as he is warning the other 24 houses on Konos that the Federation threat is real and that they seek to destroy their individuality, that a bunch of Federation ships show up. It was just a little bit too perfectly timed for me. But I don't know. Takuvma scares me enough that I feel like he might have been able to pull it off.
Yeah. Or he might have had just a little bit more knowledge of the inner workings of Federation policy than we're aware of or give him credit for.
True. That's possible as well. So at this point, we're now in the Federation ships have arrived and everyone's shooting at each other. We get exploding panels. It is officially Star Trek. There were panels.
It's officially Star. Yep. Somebody dies because they put raw plasma in every third console.
I guess I just assumed people died because when you take a bird to the face or something. I never really understood that. I just knew that it was apparently very dangerous and people should probably be wearing like helmets or masks, maybe, given the amount of
seatbelts.
Yeah, given the amount of time this happens. I don't know. But that was kind of fun. I was like, yay. I don't want you to get rid of the exploding panels. That can happen in another 15 years, but yeah. I want to keep them for now. And so then we flashed onto the brig. Burnham has no idea what's going on until Connor, the helmsman who took the exploding panel to the face, wanders down there for a really... I did not like this.
No, it was a little too... It would have been fine if he hadn't said, "You're right, I need help," and then boom, ship explodes and he's sucked out into the vacuum of space.
Yeah, basically, it was very, very obvious from like second one. Connor the helmsman, or he's at ops. He comes down and he's sent by Giorgio to go to sickbay. He's clearly disoriented. He's taken a massive head wound, and he winds up in the brig and he doesn't realize why he's there. And he asks Burnham he said, "I was supposed to go to sickbay," and she's like, "Well, honey, you're not in sickbay." He asks her like
He
what she
basically
can
asks her what's
what happened.
happening.
She says, "I'm in the brig for mutiny," and it's obviously supposed to be this really harrowing representation of, you know, very harrowing war is
The
hell
hell of war.
kind of kind of thing, where this kid goes down to sick bay, but it's not sick bay, and he's so disoriented, and he's clearly going to die, and he has a last conversation with someone who knows he's going to die, and it's just
And it
lame.
gives us our first red shirt.
Yeah, and it's just poorly acted. It wasn't that poorly written, but this kid phoned it in. Like,
I think that to me, phoning it in is not making it. He is looking like he doesn't want to be there, as opposed to trying to make this his Emmy moment.
see, that's yeah. I guess we differ there because for me, like I said, like for me, this kid looked at award-winning performances and was like, "I want to win an award," and like that's phoning it in. That's not doing your job as
Uh-huh.
an art. That's not doing your job for the script, or just not doing your job as an actor. It's just coming in and saying, "I'm going to make a statement because I'm very."
We both hated it. We hated it for the same reasons. We just have different terminology.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that you felt that way because I just remember I was like, and I've watched it again since then, and I'm just like, this is not good.
Yeah.
But and then we get a flashback to something that I had a lot of questions about. It's Michael as a child. She's injured on the colony where her parents were killed. Sarek finds her and mind melds with her to bring her back to life.
I don't think it was to bring her back to life necessarily.
Well, not to
think
life. It
more
wasn't a resurrection, but like
it was a trauma coping.
Oh no, I think she was gonna die. He says, "Come back to me."
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah, he says, "Come back to me."
But I think it was more, you know, if you're mentally in a good spot, your body can focus on other things, which is hippy dippy stuff.
Oh, you think he was trying to kind of organize her brain so she could, regulate a little bit? I don't think that's how mind melds work. Like, it seemed. Don't they have to be semi-mutual? Like,
no.
Am I nuts? Okay.
Because we've seen an Enterprise, and we've seen many other telepathy scenarios where they don't have to be. Even
is what I mean.
In Wrath of Khan, Spock and McCoy.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Surprise mind meld.
Right. Okay, that makes more sense. Never mind. And then we get the hull breach, which was pretty great.
Yeah, the hull breach itself was great.
That was probably my favorite special effect.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about, because one of the released moments in the trailer was her sitting in the brig, surrounded by the force fields, and we were curious and skeptical about that because, well, hull breaches have been a thing and we've never seen that, and now we know why.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved that.
Yeah. It was really scary. It reminded...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sort of... I think, especially in Next Generation, less so in the latter series, especially in Next Gen, we forget that we're on a spaceship and it's very, very, very dangerous if it gets to that point. You're dead. Like it's not like it's in the ocean where, you know, if you have a floaty, you got a shot. You got maybe a day, maybe two for someone to find you.
You can hang out on a boat with a tiger for a bit.
Yeah, for like a minute. It's not certain death to fall off a boat. It is certain death to fall off a spaceship. And that's effectively what she's faced with. And I love it when Star Trek creators remember that they're in a really harsh environment, and it's not just sort of this social allegory that, you know, they're in space and it's scary and they're on a frontier just being on their ship.
I think that the only time that Star Trek has made space feel that spacey, to me, was First Contact.
I agree. When they walk out, when they do the spacewalk and you get the wide shot.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that too. I remember that moment, seeing how the vastness of the Enterprise E. and the scale of, because they even, that's something that they harped on in Encounter at Farpoint, how big the Enterprise D was and how many people were aboard it and how it was, how there were schools and how it was, you know, kind of a cruise ship as well as this naval vessel, and not, it was, they harp on the scale of that quite a lot, but I never really felt it until that moment in First Contact.
Right.
So, but
wholeheartedly agree.
And then after the hull breach, Sarek visits Michael.
Mm-hmm.
They have a little
in her brain.
They have a little tête-à-tête.
Yeah, a lot of people, and this is more, I'm taking some of this from Reddit, a lot of people had issues with we've not seen mind meld work this way, and we've not seen the Katra, right?
Yeah, but the books have done that.
The books have done that, and we also saw a semi-long distance, if not this kind of long distance mind meld between Sarek and Picard, and also, and I don't remember the specifics of this, but between T'Pol and Trip in Enterprise.
Yeah, I think the Vulcan telepathy or empathy or even extrasensory perception is kind of blessedly left a little bit undefined.
Mm-hmm.
So they can play with it like this. I like that they're not true telepaths or true empaths, kind of like the Beta Zeds or the Beta Zoids.
Yeah.
But I like that they have this sort of, they're almost like New Mutants, like 12-year-old, 13-year-old telepathic mutants, like, or like the Okampa.
That's exactly what I was going to say, was that we don't see their telepathy much, but they're like Professor X level that just dial it back.
Well, I don't know about that. I feel like I liken the Okampa more to that explanation. I think Vulcans have low level. Again, I'm going to go with like extrasensory stuff because it's still so undefined. I think they have low level access to that, but their emotional side is so unrestrained and so repressed that I feel like that's standing between them and mastering their full like telepathic abilities. So I think it's largely like kind of untapped and uncharted, and we don't know how powerful it is because if they ever indulged in it, it would be catastrophic because their emotional sides are so crazy. That's but it's something interesting I did read was that I guess Sarek's Bendy syndrome, which is what he eventually dies of in reunification, somebody
maybe a result of this
might have been a result of this.
I didn't see that. I like that a lot.
I liked it too because I already have faith in these. I already have faith in these stories, in these showrunners and the creators, just because they have attempted to link back to Trek so intricately with the whole thing with the Natu 5 and, like I said, all the other references that we've gotten that actually really that fit really, really well. That kind of, it really intrigues me, the fact that they even mentioned, because in this conversation with Burnham that Sarek has, which is in real time, it's not a flashback, he is telepathically communicating with her at great distances. Because when he mind melded with her, he imbued with her a part of his Katra.
Yeah, because he gave her the super mind meld.
Exactly.
Which also might be where the come back to me came from, is that he actively did more than just a mind meld. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of with that too, which makes me so happy. Which really warms my heart. It's, by the way, the Katra thing to me really sounded like Kramer from Seinfeld. Like, you guys, we gotta forget that we talked about the Katra. Give it a different name. So I can't take it seriously anymore. But the idea is that he melds with her, or he doesn't meld, but he contacts her and he says, this happens at great physical cost to me. And at some point during the scene, he like kind of collapses. And I think it makes more than a lot of sense that this is possibly where the start of his Bendy syndrome comes from.
That's very interesting.
I know, it excites me. He also, one of them says, I can't remember if it's Burnham or Sarek that says nothing is eternal. It really resonated with me.
Uh, I don't recall, but that sounds like a very Sarek line.
Yeah. Well, back to the bridge. The Shenzo is adrift at this point. They don't have impulse. They don't have shields, but the Klingons back off. And the Europa steps in to stop the Shenzo from careening into...
Yeah, the Europa shows up fashionably late.
Well, they've been there. I think they've...
No, I think they warped in late.
Okay. Well, Admiral Brett Anderson's a piece of shit, so that doesn't surprise me. The Europa tractor beams Shenzo out of ramming... out of a collision course with an asteroid. They chat for a minute, and Brett Anderson contacts the Klingons and is like, well, here, gentlemen. Clearly you've suffered losses, and we've suffered losses, and I think it's high time that we talk.
And now you will actually answer the phone for me.
Thank you so much. And it's kind of this hilarious, like, I think I have in my notes, Brett Anderson, ha, this guy plays squash. Also, asshole. Like, oh, I could not stand this guy. And
he's very proud that he always tips 15%.
Absolutely.
Because he is very generous.
Absolutely. He is generous.
Even when they don't deserve it.
Generous man. Because you know what? Sometimes people have a bad day, and, I don't know what their struggle is. And,
yeah, so that's 15%.
It's probably the biggest tip they're going to see all day. They've had a bad day.
Yeah.
Brett's server in this case is Takuvma, who is very happy to send his envoy so that they can talk. And Brett Anderson, and they end the conversation, and Brett Anderson is basically like, see, and that's how it's done.
And this is why you bring the admirals in. And then, of course, Takuvma's envoy happens to be a boat.
Takuvma says, lest anyone doubt, I can make my ships invisible. And then
Which was a dumb line.
It really was, because, I'm like, the ship's invisible. It doesn't mean you can't bump into shit, okay?
Yeah.
Like, what was your plan? Did you just let the Europa get 3 fleet from your hull? Because you're a big ship, so you can't move away. I don't know. That, to me, could have been really cool, but it made it look like the producers of the show didn't understand that cloaks only meant you can't see the ship, not that the ship is, like, out of phase or isn't there.
Yeah.
Like, they're not in a slightly different reality. They're still there.
Right. However, I that doesn't change the fact that I really loved the boat to the face maneuver.
And the fact that they didn't decloak, that they just rammed into it, and we had to figure out what was happening. That was really cool. And then the fact that the Europa self-destructed, that was really cool.
The fact that the Europa self-destructed and it was absolutely ineffective.
Well, it's because we always see the self-destruct, like, wolf cry is made at least 3 times per Trek series.
Per Trek season.
Well, definitely on Voyager. That was, like, Captain Janeway's signature move. But...
Activate self-destruct and open hailing frequencies. There's coffee in that nebula.
Yeah, and that's it for the Europa. Which was, I think this was one of the first moments, too, that I was like, wow, this is really, really upsetting and abrupt and really aggressive for Star Trek.
With the Battle of Wolf 359, which, I mean, granted, we did for Deep Space Nine, but it was old news.
Well, but on a smaller scale, and, like, these, like, yeah, it was, yeah. It's just
and they made it personal.
Very intense. So, the rope is gone. Takuvma is... Takuvma the Unforgettable.
Yep.
And for now he is. And then we head back to the brig, and Michael Burnham logics her way out, which I thought was a brilliant, brilliant scene, because so rarely... We hear a lot about Vulcan logic, but we rarely, if ever, see actual... studied logic games played by Vulcans or played out by Vulcans.
Yeah. To me, this, more than anything, if you discount all of the production quality aspects, this gave me the most hope for this as a Star Trek series.
Oh, yeah?
Because this was we are going to explore the thought process and um, use essentially our minds we're going to solve this problem
We're not going to
intelligently.
play to the 12-year-old audience. This is Star
Right.
Trek for adults.
Mm-hmm.
And
And,
that's what
and
I
I mean,
wanted.
yeah, and I did miss Majel Barrett
Yeah.
as the voice of the computer. Pour one out for that. But
Yeah.
if this is the kind of computer we're going to see,
Well, it makes
uh,
sense, though, because, I mean, people have said that number one or Nurse Chapel was the voice of the computer. So it kind of makes sense because she's not the voice of the computer for Enterprise, I don't think. Is she?
no, she's not. The
Mm-hmm.
computer doesn't have a voice for Enterprise.
Ah, okay. I should probably rewatch that show. I should probably watch that show. I watched the Mirror episodes. And all the episodes where T'Pol and Trip might make out. So, after the battle is over, we have the scene where Takuvma dramatically embalms his dead, and this is where we get, where we... Did we touch on the coffin, the fact that the ship has coffins on it last week? That happened in the first episode. This is another, I keep reading, I don't know how I had a blank spot about Klingons not giving a shit about their corpses, but I'm now with you on the fact that it is really, really weird that they're all over, that Takuvma is so concerned with them.
Yeah, I think it might just be the Takuvma sect. I had an issue with this,
down with that.
With the collection of the corpses scene, or with rather the solution that Captain Georgiou comes up with.
Uh-huh.
And it is the fact that what they are doing would absolutely be considered a war crime.
Okay, right. Because you don't disturb the dead. You let... That's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and for her to be the one to conceive this idea, but at the same time not have been willing to listen to Mike is an issue to me.
Yeah, because you get the sense that, I mean, I can understand how this is a moment in which Philippa is relating to Mike's journey, because at some point during this episode, Mike says to her, I violated Starfleet regulation, but I chose the safety of the crew, and I chose your life and my life and the life of the crew over Starfleet ideals.
Yeah.
And
it happens after this.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because she tells her. Yeah, but it's... well, I mean, in that case, I understand it more.
This idea come from Mike or Saru.
No, I mean, I think it's a little bit ham-handed. Like, I think it's a little bit clunky. But I like the fact that because Philippa makes this decision and it's clearly emotionally based, she is able to understand why Michael made her decision. Because she's also seen evidence that the Klingons... She's now seen evidence of how fierce and how dangerous the Klingons are, which you get the feeling she didn't really have an appreciation for, or at least it's kind of my interpretation of it. And I don't disagree with you in the sense that I didn't love it, because I think it's very clunky, but I think the grounding behind that is that she is making the same mistake that Michael did several hours before. And Michael's the one who kind of talks her down from it.
Yeah.
But it still goes along with the fact that, like, everything in this episode was underlined and overplayed. And this didn't need to be this intense.
I honestly don't think, because of the fact that there was no point where it seemed like anyone had an issue with this idea, and with everything else being underlined, it kind of struck me as especially odd.
Well, I mean, I think we also still have to give credit to the fact that this is still not the Federation that we're used to, and not the Starfleet that we're used to. I feel like Kirk would have done this. I don't know that people would have been pleased by it.
I feel like I feel like this could have been a decision made with the same gravity as in the Pale Moonlight.
I think that for me, Michelle Yeoh sold it, but I do see, I see what you're saying. I think it might have, I'm not super worried about it going forward just because I feel like they were trying to shove a movie into 90 minutes, shove a 2-hour movie into 90 minutes. So I think that's why we got a little bit of, I think that's why we all feel a little bit rattled right now. But so Takuvma handily decides to tractor beam his dad. The Discovery sees he's doing it. Michael Burnham sees he's doing it. She says they're gathering her dead. And then Saru gets the idea to embed a torpedo into one of the...
A worker bee.
Yeah, it's a worker bee. So they're going to send something. They're basically going to send a very small delivering system that does need to... very small delivering system that's going to be mistaken for one of the corpses and blow up this flagship that has just murdered a bunch of Starfleet officers. And Michael Burnham comes up and is like, hey, that's an awesome idea. You should not do that. And Michelle and Georgiou is like, cool, I've about had it with you. And drags her into the ready room again. And Burnham says, you can't do that. He's made himself a messiah. If you kill Takuvma, he's a martyr. They're going to fight for him even more if you do that. It's probably what he wanted. You cannot. What you need to do is take him as prisoner.
And then what they do
is attempt.
Is attempt that.
Yeah, and
then
this is where Burnham says, like, I tried it. They're arguing before she convinces her to do this, and she said, and at some point Burnham offers to sacrifice herself, and she'll drive because Georgiou wants to drive the worker bee, and it's all very dramatic. Mm-hmm. And Burnham says, no, you can't do it, and if you're going to do it, then I will. And in the interim, they kind of have a meeting of the minds, and Georgiou says, I thought it could make you human, and I can't believe I knew you so little. You're not ready. And Burnham points out that she tried to save the crew as opposed to upholding Starfleet ideals. And it kind of echoed a problem I think Starfleet has really skirted over, or Star Trek has really skirted over since its inception, which is that all of these crews eventually play to this high-minded ideal that they sacrifice themselves for the good of the many. The good of the many outweigh the good of the few, which is a Vulcan saying, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's always bothered me, if only just because, I don't know if you felt the same way, that I just feel like that's always where Star Trek's a little unbelievable. The Federation's a little too good. They're a little too moral. It's too many people with the same values all the time. It doesn't feel completely human. And this felt really human. She felt like she really thought she was right. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, in this episode, I see that she wasn't right. I think it didn't work out in her favor. I mean, I think, obviously, you don't nerf bench your captain, but she wasn't really wrong about the intent of the Klingons.
Yeah. But ultimately, she chose, and I don't know if she was choosing the needs of the few, or if she was choosing the needs of Starfleet.
Or maybe she's just pointing out that you can't really quantify human lives that way. That no person, no being can do that, because we don't think in terms of quantity versus quality. We think in terms of priority. There are people that are closest to us. There are people that are close to us. There are people who aren't. And I like that they kind of addressed that flaw in that logic. And they did it in the voice of a human kind of Vulcan hybrid. And it's, like I said, an issue Star Trek skirted over a lot. It's sort of, I like it when Star Trek's ideals are kind of get their feet held to the fire, because they're so high-minded and they're so progressive that when you actually do try to see how they would parse out and unfold and unpack in a realistic situation, a lot of them succeed and then some of them don't. And I just think it's nice to see a show treated with that much gravitas, I guess, or that much respect. So, but then they did.
Yeah. Oh. No, I agree. And I think that that's one of the reasons that Deep Space Nine became such a Dark Horse fan favorite, is because it did approach itself with that gravitas a lot more frequently than any other series.
Yeah, it really questioned itself quite a bit. I think this series is going to do that with a bit more finesse. than DS9 would have been able to.
I don't necessarily disagree, but at the same time, I think that it is because it is being designed as prestige television and a much more serialized story. I think that it's going to lack a lot of levity that will, at least in my opinion, my concern is that the moments of gravitas won't have as much weight.
Oh yeah,
because they'll be 3 times an episode.
I hear you.
Already,
no.
Again, going back to In the Pale Moonlight, we've seen the "I can live with it" moment 3 or 4 times already.
Yeah, I'm really banking on the first couple of episodes of this being like this, and then the rest of them settling down. Only just because I've heard a couple of things, but I've heard that the first 3 episodes are very kind of Abrams verse, and then I'm hoping that like somebody just backed off. That they were like, okay, we've let everybody have their like bit in this, and I'm hoping for the last 5 episodes of the first half of the season that it's more the same people and not like 50 cooks in this kitchen, because I really like I don't think it's a lack of levity that this pilot suffered from. I think it was the fact that I think there was levity. I mean, we had Saru, we had Malik Benchali's character. You know, it wasn't a heavy, hard, dark story without all of the added drama that was added by the 50 different elements that were designed there to make us understand that this was very dramatic, like the camera work and the lens flares and the subtitles and the exposition and just all of this stuff that was there. I'm hoping that falls away and we'll just get the story, because the story is good and the acting is good, and that's kind of all you need. But
I won't be turned away by a darker Star Trek, but I am concerned that is the tone that they want.
I almost feel like there's I'm almost wondering if this isn't going to be the first Star Trek tragedy. That we're going to have this character, Michael Burnham, and her journey is to redeem herself for this fatal mistake, and she doesn't go on after that journey.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking on that a lot. And specifically, I've been thinking about Tom Paris.
Well, should we, real quick...
Yeah, let's finish the recap. And
so they gather their dead, and Burnham and Georgiou pilot the worker bee.
First they blow up the neck with a bomb and a corpse.
Oh yeah, they actually do that, and then they're able to get on board, and the 2 of them, the captain and the XO, attempt to take a Klingon prisoner off of a ship where they know they're fully outnumbered.
Which is a very Kirk move.
Well, it's also, I think at this point, like somebody made I feel like I read online somewhere that people were just like, oh, that was the dumbest decision. And I thought, I was like, well, if they're adrift and without shields at this point.
Not just that, but if we're looking at this as 10 years before Kirk was on every away mission.
True.
With Spock most of the time.
Well, there's an away mission, and then there's a 60% suicide mission, and that's what this is. I still think it's a little...
Kirk was still on
well, and it was... Well, yeah, but... Yeah, I guess that's right. I don't know. It's still... I feel like Star Trek... I feel like modern times have graduated to the point where they're like, yeah, that was dumb and definitely done as a plot device because we needed our leads on the planet, whereas... Mm-hmm. Other Star Trek didn't so much, or at least they made a point of saying, Captain, you're going on an away mission. Could you maybe not do that? This was egregious on a couple of different levels, and mostly on the level that the camera work was so fucking overzealous that they had Michelle Yeoh in a martial arts position, and I saw her do exactly maybe 2 moves, and I don't know why you would cast Michelle Yeoh and you wouldn't let her get in one fucking killer roundhouse and let her just round out the badassery that she laid down just by sitting in a captain's chair and being as effective as Janeway was in 7 seasons. And
I can't defend the scene on the Klingon vessel. It was very hard to follow for me.
Essentially, guys, like, they get on there, they try to grab somebody, there's a fight, Georgiou dies. And
Yep, and then Takuma dies.
so yeah, I am not pleased with what happened on the Klingon ship.
No, it was hard to follow. We don't get, like you were saying, we don't get any Michelle Yeoh combat whatsoever. We get Takuma's death, which is hard to catch, honestly. And
yeah, and that I really didn't catch it at all.
And it was just a very difficult to follow, in my opinion, poorly framed combat.
Oh my god, so, like, you know more about stage combat and fight choreography than I do, but this was just frustrating. You could never get a clear shot of anything, and it didn't add to the tension, it didn't add to the stakes. It just frustrated me. And like, I think Michelle Yeoh is a phenomenal actress. I don't think she needs to kung fu it up in every single role that she has. But
if you have a scene that you're putting her in combat, you put the camera somewhere where we can watch it.
Exactly. If you have her as a military commander, and you put her, you're right, you put her in physical combat, I don't understand why I'm not seeing her full capabilities, because all that does is imbue Starfleet with yet another layer of the fact that this is an elite institution. Yep. And that she's an elite captain, because that's all she's done in the last 2 hours, the last just 2 episodes, is prove that she's an elite captain in every capacity. So, you said something, and I feel like I talked over you a minute ago.
Oh no, just that. That I don't recall what it was. So yeah.
That was, and it was, I think, just doubly frustrating. I think this really is, for me, the biggest misstep of this episode, because it really hampers my enjoyment of it, because I know what she can do. I felt like a waste. It felt like a waste.
Yep, I did like the passing of the mantle onto Vogue. I thought that was well done.
Should we talk about the fact that Vogue is an albino Klingon?
I would like to mention the fact that Vogue is an albino Klingon, and in a certain we've encountered them. We've encountered very old albino Klingons.
And don't Klingons
in Deep Space Nine
have a slightly longer lifespan?
Klingons have a slightly longer lifespan if they manage to live long enough to have it.
Like 120 to 130,
yeah,
I feel like.
We could very well have seen the scene. So in the episode of Deep Space Nine, Blood Oath, there is a character called the Albino.
Who's never named,
and who was leading essentially a rebellion against the Klingon Empire proper sometime around original series era, where Kang, Kor, and I'm forgetting the third one.
Well, Curzon.
3 Klingons from the original series reunite in Deep Space Nine to beat this guy, because he swore a blood oath and was killing their kids.
Yeah, and he actually killed, Curzon is Kang's, Curzon, I believe, is Kang's.
He's the ambassador to Kronos.
Well, yeah, but they're good friends, and Kang's son dies.
Kang actually named his son Dax.
Yeah, and Kang's son dies at the hands of this albino. So at some point, the albino is discovered, and the Klingons on Deep Space Nine come back and engage, and essentially engage Jadzia Dax to come and help them find the albino once more. And Jadzia is like, cool, and Sisko's like, maybe don't do that.
Right.
It's not worth the time. And
Dax is like, maybe yes, and then they do.
Dax is like, I'm fucking Dax, and I'm 900 years old. Or 600 years old.
Yeah. Do we want to work through the last moments of the episode and then talk about Takuma?
Yeah. So just as long as you guys, everybody watched Blood Oath.
Yeah,
really
I think that we might need to start doing weekly this is the episode to watch. Blood Oath isn't this week. This week it's the prophecy.
Yeah. Watch the prophecy this week. We'll do that when it's relevant.
Yeah,
Might not be relevant every episode. So after all of the death,
after the death of Takuvma and Giorgio,
it's time for a court martial.
It's the worst lit court martial in history.
The jazziest court martial.
Yeah,
People were smoking in there.
I'm glad I wasn't the only one that thought Fosse.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that have been great if she'd just whipped out a cane and a bowler hat and just was went into Bye Bye Blackbird and sang herself out. People don't.
Or if her lawyer turned out to be Billy Flynn.
Oh man! And now a tap dance, and all of a sudden, Star Trek is a vaudeville musical,
which fits. Yeah. So
I'd be down with that 20 years from now and drunk. So hit me
20 minutes from now.
Hit me up. And it's brutal. She is sentenced to life.
She's sentenced to life, which, again, this is something that a lot of people have said. Why is Starfleet giving her the life in prison? Because she's a mutineer, and we've established that 10 years later, they have the death penalty just for hanging out on Talos 5. Yeah. Talos 4, Talos 5.
I think this is a really, really good point, because if people are complaining about that at this point in the show, it means you either haven't watched Star Trek in a while or you're a new fan. Starfleet is the military, specifically the Navy. And one thing that Star Trek has taken seriously in every single series is that if you disobey some of basically what we can call naval primary laws, which is don't fucking mutineer.
Don't fucking mutiny is
mutiny.
Probably general order number 2.
Yeah, if you disobey, Star Trek is very good at treating Starfleet like a military. It's if you screw up in a big way, in a big militaristic way, they will throw the book at you, and they're pretty unforgiving. This was she could have been sentenced to death, because it was, as far as Starfleet is concerned, her actions that caused this altercation in the first place. She was the one who pushed to go out in the fucking spacewalk. She was the one who killed the Klingon. She was the one who locked weapons on the Klingon ship and got them to engage with them in the first place. It was because of her that they called the ships there in the first place, where there was a massacre. And she was the one who was like, let's go aboard the ship and get a prisoner. And so she grabbed Giorgio off the ship and had them go, which is obviously something Saru probably would have told everybody, because Giorgio isn't there to take up for Burnham. Mm-hmm. In today's military, if she did something like that, we would never have heard her name again. You don't do that. You don't nerve pinch your captain. You
wouldn't have heard her name again until she ended up on a season of Serial.
Exactly. You don't. She physically assaulted her superior officer. This isn't like slapping your boss in the face and walking out of your job.
Which is also frowned upon, by the way.
Yeah. But your boss probably isn't going to throw you in prison for life. This is a big deal what she did. It's a big deal for Star Trek that the lead of our series is somebody who's screwed up to this degree. And I think this probably is a good idea for you to talk about Tom Paris, right? Because we've seen this before.
At the same time, we've seen this before, and it was Tom Paris who was kicked out of Starfleet for basically joyriding.
Well, and killing someone.
Killing someone while joyriding. So we have seen we're going to have the redemptive arc of pretty much all of, or half of the cast of Voyager was characters that are going to get a redemptive arc. However, they didn't go that route with it, but it was the initial idea. So
yeah, it's Paris is such a natural parallel to draw to this. I think but I think we also forget a little bit that Paris was in the academy at the time and was trying to show off. And I think they're trying to pin the cause of an escalation in the Klingon Federation conflict on Burnham. So not only did she kill Giorgio, she started a war. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to see a lot of that this season.
Yeah.
Or this series, but I guess what I'm saying is that I still don't have a problem with the fact that we're seeing characters starting at this place, because we had an entire series built around that. Which was a much more lighthearted series.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you were okay. But yeah. I think again, it's sort of. Do you see what I mean when I like get so excited about Brian Fuller and how well that because this is his story. Like these two episodes were his original concept, and the amount, and he worked on Voyager. So what we're about to talk about, which happened in Prophecy, the Kuv Maga, which
he actively worked on this episode.
Yeah, this is when you're folks when you're seeing, if you're watching this with the same eye that we are, and you're seeing these callbacks are intentional and they're deep.
Things like there was an episode of Voyager called Prophecy in season 6 or season 7. What? Season 7. Yeah, because
B'Elanna's pregnant.
Barge of the Dead. Yeah. Barge of the Damned was the other one. But in it, they run across a Klingon ship from the original series era because it's the 7th season of Voyager, and that's what you do.
And they're still in the Delta Quadrant, so it would have taken those guys that long to get there if they were kind of meandering around.
Yep, and they did. And they were following some prophecies from 100 years ago about someone called the Kuva Ma, who was a Klingon messiah, who is going to essentially unite them all.
Klingon Empire to greater glory.
The Klingon Empire and drive it to greater glory. And
they, after a revolution, essentially, after trying to...
Yep, they had a revolution.
They decided to flit off.
They were exiled and moved on following the scrolls and the prophecy.
And wholly unrelated to the prophecy, they suffer from a kind of feels like genetic but turns out to be viral illness, which kills them, called the Naret.
Yeah.
And there's speculation that this particular sect suffered from the Naret, and maybe that's what caused their ancestors, if T'Kuvma is that, to be bald or to look a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a possibility, but I just think that the T'Kuvma that the Kuvama sect is literally the next iteration of the sect that we're seeing right now, founded by the writings of Voq.
I kind of hope it is. Because that would be super dope. And we just have to figure out a way for them to look like regular Klingons before they split off and go to the Delta Quadrant. Because when they encounter them, they don't look like original series Klingons. They don't look like these Klingons. They look like DS9 Klingons. And so
this is true.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed there's some kind of fashion event that we see. But it is, yes.
And hair comes back into style.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there were bald Klingons. I just watched a bit of The Undiscovered Country today, and there are bald Klingons all up around that movie. Women. And, we didn't talk about face chains.
Yeah.
Face chains is my favorite. I just really hope we get to meet her in real life. She's of the House Dagor, and is it Dagor or Magor?
It's Dagor.
It's Dagor, and they show up in DS9 in a phenomenal episode in which Worf helps this Klingon woman who he has a delightful relationship with win back her house from a suitor. It's kind of like a weird warped version of the Odyssey, and one of the dishonorable suitors is a suitor from the House Dagor that we've seen evidence of now 3 centuries or a couple of centuries earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Wearing some just really excellent facial piercings.
Yeah. Anything else we have to say about these first 2 episodes?
I'm kind of stressed. I'm excited, but to almost a stressed point to meet Gabriel Lorca, because if Georgia was this good, and she was really good, I already like Jason Isaacs. I don't know if I have time to like Gabriel Lorca as much as I have the capacity to, if he's really good.
I feel like I'm concerned that Gabriel Lorca is going to be. I'm saying concerned, but concern isn't right because I don't think it'll necessarily be negative. But my feeling is that Gabriel Lorca is going to be a Section 31 captain.
A lot of people are speculating about her being a Romulan, like Burnham being a Romulan spy, or a lot of people are speculating treachery on this show, which I find I think that's compelling. I would be surprised if it was coming from Lorca. Or maybe I don't want it to. I don't know. But I think we've already seen evidence, you know, we've seen trailers where she says, you know, what's going on this ship, and clearly there's an indication that something is happening both on the Discovery and outside of it. I don't know that I'm ready to lose more faith in Starfleet. I don't want this to become like House of Cards where you can't trust anybody.
That's kind of my thought.
I think that's something I'm still hitting on now that I've gotten to know the show a little bit. I don't know how you feel, but like, I think I mentioned that like I tried not to really think about this or have expectations about it. And this worry concerns me because I feel like it's the realest one, that it's going to be an insidious threat that is the problem and not the Klingons. And I don't know that I want a serialized Starfleet story about the corruption of Starfleet.
Although that was the pitch for season 4, the arc of TNG, was the bug conspiracy.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Well, you know, the episode Conspiracy, where in season 1, where the bugs are taking over the brains of Starfleet admirals. That was going to be the big bad, and they turned it into the Borg because it was too creepy and weird and not in line.
It also didn't. It was very much like Star Wars prequels where the tech wasn't quite.
Yeah.
Well, it's also a little bit like you don't want them. I think Star Trek 2 has always been cognizant of not letting the mystery overtake things. And the problem with a mystery is that it really steals people's attention. I mean, I remember watching Lost and not caring about anything. I didn't care about the relationships. I didn't care about the island. I wanted to know what the fuck happened. Mm-hmm. And eventually I ran out of steam because that mystery was so compelling that I didn't care about anything else, and they never solved the mystery. I'm not a person who likes to order things from shows that she loves, and I don't want to do the same thing with Star Trek, but I don't want it to become sort of a confusing sci-fi mystery caper. Like that to me isn't unique. It's very done.
I don't mind it's no longer, we don't need to follow the Roddenberry rule and have everybody get along all the time. But I also don't want it to be a Starfleet on Starfleet fighting over what's best, what Starfleet, what ideals of Starfleet are okay to subvert.
Yeah, I don't want Starfleet to be a gray area.
I'm okay with Starfleet having gray areas.
Yeah. I don't want it to be like
but
our
government. I don't
government.
want that to be the focus.
Yeah, I don't want it to... Star Trek at the end of the day is utopic. And I think if you lose that, that's when you lose Star Trek. Uh-huh. And I think that's the temptation, because it would be really, really cool to see some kind of dystopia within Star Trek, but I don't think you can do it without destroying part of what makes this show so watchable, which is that it's kind of a safe space, and it's idealism. Star Trek is idealism. If you want dystopia, if you want maybe to you a more realistic version of humanity, then this is not the show for you. The Handmaid's Tale is the show for you. Westworld is the show for you. Game of Thrones is the show for you. Star Trek has always been about hope, and I'm wondering if the homesickness and kind of like unease that I was feeling watching the pilot was that it wouldn't be that anymore.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to see where it goes once we're done with the opening pilot arc, for that very reason.
I'm waiting to read Jason Isaac's first couple of lines and be like, okay, are you Lucius, or are you that lovely gay cross-dresser in Sweet November? He was wonderful in that, folks. So what you need to do is watch Prophecy, you need to watch Blood Oath, and you need to watch Sweet November, and then you'll be prepared for episode 3.
Hold on Blood Oath. We'll let you know when Blood Oath is really appropriate.
You cannot hold on Sweet November.
On Prophecy.
On
or Sweet
November.
All right, so So with that, we'll leave you. Anything else?
No. We will see you back Tuesday morning
With a one episode recap of Context is for Kings, which would be an excellent name for this podcast.
Bye, folks. Thank you so much.